So hello and welcome back to G Giles Art Styles. We have another watercolor demonstration for you today, and I just finished cutting out a whole bunch of these leaves for tonight's watercolor workshop that I'm hosting out of my art garage, and they make wonderful little stencils. And what we're going to work on now today is blocking in our colors and doing some washes and layering techniques. So I'm using just a small piece of paper today. This is about poster size. We have it taped down using painter's tape that you can find at any standard hardware store. And I used a simple cardstock to make the stencils in various sizes. I went ahead and made some that are a little more complicated. Things are going to have cut-ins. You're going to have to work a little harder to make sure you stay within the lines, or we can stick with something that's a little simpler along the lines of these guys here. Make sure everyone has plenty of options to choose from. But because I'm going to want to keep this lesson pretty quick, we're going to stick with this one. All right, so we're going to take our stencil and we're going to just trace using a pencil directly onto our paper. And I want to trace these leaves to make it look like a bunch of fall leaves that have fallen and collected on the ground, but I'm not going to stop tracing when I come to the line. I'm going to trace and we're going to stack our leaves on top of each other. And as we move through this demo, you will see why we are stacking. So you're more than welcome to freehand if you like. However, sometimes that can get a little daunting if you're not used to drawing all the time. So doing yourself a favor and just taking a little time before you start this sort of a project and draw out your stencil. And that way it's also cohesive and stays pretty much the same throughout the board. All right, we'll keep getting caught on the edge of my tape here. Okay. And as you can see, I'm allowing this to kind of go off the edge of the paper as well. And having some good layering spots. And kind of just working intuitively to look around my paper, see where things need to be filled in, and adding a stencil as such. Okay, leave that. Excellent. And now let's just put one lovely leaf right here in the middle. It's going to layer over a whole bunch of them. All right, so now we have our stencils down on our paper. The first thing that we want to do is we're going to do like a wash. Now with a wash, put our pencil back where it belongs. With a wash, it's very similar to what we were doing before. We're going to get our paper wet. And I'm looking for the spaces that are around the leaves where the ground or sky might be. But I'm not going to focus too much on trying to keep things like in the lines right now, because like I said, this is going to be our first layer, and a wash is basically just the dilution of pigments. So that you can create a really nice light coloring onto your background. Okay, so while this paper is soaking up that water, excellent. Okay, I'm going to make my wash. So I'm going to use the plastic on my palette, and I'm going to just keep adding water over here, and then I'll add some pigment. And as we can see, that's blue, but it is very watered down. Just keep picking up some water, add it over. Okay, that's pretty good. We're gonna come back over here. You want your wash to be really light because, like I said, we're gonna be layering these colors on top of each other, so you don't want to have it be crazy dark, because watercolor, again, is a transparent, translucent paint. It does not stay opaque. You cannot layer a lighter color on top of a darker color. So always try and make sure that you work light to dark. All right, we're going to go ahead and put some of these pigments down, and I'm going to dab them in, going back to my wash. Because again, I don't want to go for a bunch of strong pigments. I want it to stay light behind where the leaves are going to go. But because I still enjoy getting that like flowing state, I went ahead and I'm just going to dab the paint on. I'm not looking to fill it in, so I'm not trying to stay within lines. I'm just trying to make sure that I have a nice background to fill in here. All right, simple enough. So we're gonna allow this wash to dry, and once that's dry, we're gonna come back in and we're gonna start blocking in our colors and start layering and seeing what kind of effect we get with that. All right, hold tight. All right, so our paper feels dry for the most part, so it's a little damp here. You can see it's a little damp there. I mean, just use the side of your finger, your pinky finger, and just kind of like dab. Find out where we want to start. We want to find the driest part of the paper first. All right. And what we're going to do first is, well, after finding the driest part of the paper, after that, we're just going to wet our brush and we're going to paint with water. So I'm going to start over here in this corner because that feels pretty dry. And I'm now going to stay within the line of my leaf. But I'm going to allow myself to go over these spots that already, where they layer on top of each other. So we'll do some layering. First we get that wet, and I'm going to come in here with my goldenrod yellow, because I will use the dirty paints that my students did not want. And we're just going to put the pigments down, and wherever you have put the water is where the pigments will flow. The pigments will not flow where it's dry, which is one of the things that I know drives people the most crazy when it comes to painting with watercolor, is how do you keep the pigments from running into each other? Well, we do that by learning how to work around the page. Okay. And I know we're still in summer, but we've been getting some wonderful cool days around here, and I am just in a mood for fall. So that's what I'm going to paint, is some lovely fall leaves. All right, now like I tell my students at school, when you're putting down color, start with your lightest colors, and the lightest color that we have out of all of them is going to be yellow. So yellow, anything, just about anything can be painted over yellow, with exception to blue. You know what happens when you put blue over yellow, we get a little green, which is why you have a little green in here, but that's okay. I'm not going to stress myself over that. It just adds and actually creates a little cohesion when you have your background, your sky reflects in the shadows of what it is that you're painting. It brings it all together really nicely. So it's totally fine. Again, we do not need to be have to like paint inside the lines when we put down that first wash. But when we come back to do this one, we paint inside the lines with the water first, and then we'll come back in while it's still wet. And you want want to be able to use your eyes. So you move around, you look to see, does it look a little wet? Does it look wet? As long as it's wet, you're going to be golden. All right. And I'm trying to look around my paper and make sure that I'm not putting like all the yellow over here or making like it over here. Like you want it to be balanced, and you balance your art by looking around and using your eye. You don't want to like you make your art heavy to one side when you either put too much on one side. So if I had put all the leaves over here with just a few over here, it would have looked cool, but like I'd need to be mindful of why I'm putting my leaf stencil down the way that I am. But just to keep things simple at this point, think balance, a nice spreading out of things, and just making sure that things are like one side of the paper, the other side of the paper is cohesive with one another. So I'm going to start with 3 is a magic number. It's a magic number in so many different areas of life, but when it comes to art, 3 is like the perfect number when it comes to creating balance within your artwork. So I'm going to do 3 yellow leaves. And now that I've got those done, I don't want to come through until these have dried here to paint those in. But I am looking around my paper, and like there's a couple here that I can go ahead and get started. And I'm just going to work in a gradient, and we're going to do orange next. I'm keeping that fall theme. So I'll start with this guy right here. Alright, paint that in. I ordered this watercolor paper off of Amazon. It got a bunch of stars, but I'm not gonna lie, it's a little thin for my liking. And it doesn't seem to like absorb the water and dry quite as quickly, which I guess has its own benefits, but just FYI, when it comes to like wanting to paint and picking your watercolor paper, a thick, heavy duty paper, cold pressed, is usually ideal. Now you'll also see that I'm not like filling in and going like this with my paints and just dabbing them in. That way I'm giving my pigments the opportunity to be able to float across the page, which is something that they tend to like to do. But I'm also finding myself in a bit of a pickle because it is not drying as fast as I was hoping it would. And what did I say about putting pigments next to pigments? I can't put anything here, and I can't put anything here, and I can't do any of these here. I guess I'll go for that one. We'll make that middle leaf orange. Alright, so once again, we're just going through and first painting with just water. As you can see, like my paper is a little there's definitely pigment in my paintbrush. That's okay. We know what we're trying to do. Alright. Come back in with the orange. And this one may give me an opportunity to show you what happens when you try and paint too close. Here's another thing I'm not liking too much about this paper. The adhesive that they use in the paper is coming through and pushing my pigments away here. Not a fan of that. Hiss, boo, boo, hiss. But that's what you get when you order art supplies off of Amazon if you don't have any background on what those supplies are really like. I am a bit of a supply snob when it comes to what I use for making my art, which I know it works, and we should be grateful for it. This is part of why I also like use this sort of a palette for these demonstrations, because like this is what you can find when you go to Walmart or Target, King Supers, like any arts and crafts section where they're going to have like kids art supplies or school supplies are going to have these sort of palettes of paint. Okay, that one feels like it's probably dry enough. Oops, all right. So now we're going to come back through and wet that again. Painting in with water. I know, it's so exciting. My favorite color is clear, and I live in the corner of a circle. Just to get people thinking. And come back in with my orange paint. And so as you can see, as we layer those on top of each other, you get that yellow that comes through the orange. You get sort of that translucent effect. Okay. Now, working around the paper, trying to feel where things are dry. I'm not at a place where I feel comfortable filling this in yet, so we're going to go ahead and allow this to dry just a little bit before moving on, and then we'll come back to it. So yeah, working with watercolors is a lot of like paint fast and then wait. And I think that, yeah, that's good and dry. All right, now we're going to come back for our third color. That color be green. I will be adding red in at the end. Alright. Okay, now here's the thing with the green in this particular pack. I don't like this green. I think it is heinous green. So I will blend some yellow in with this green just to lighten it up and make it a little more palatable for my taste. Like I said, the green on its own is a little institutional for my liking. So you add a little yellow pigment in with that green, and it actually becomes a pretty lovely little green. And let's do this one green. See what happens when we put green over orange. I have an idea of what happens when we put green over yellow, right? That. So we're going to add some green over the top of this orange. Now I know when you mix something like a cool color like green with a warm color like orange, they have a tendency to want to turn brown. But given the nature of what our subject matter is for this painting, brown's totally okay, so I'm not upset at the idea of this potentially going brown. And then we'll get to see how these paints layer a little better. You put orange on top of yellow. How do we make orange? It's yellow and red, and so they kind of mute one another out. But when you start layering colors that don't sit next to each other on the color wheel, that's when things start to get interesting with the way that the pigments are going to work together. And the layering effect is a little more prominent. Alright. And we'll do this leaf here will also be green. So come in here, paint it clear first. Paint it clear, and wherever your paper is wet is where your pigments will flow. Alright. I'm glad I went with the simple leaf design choice. Don't get me wrong, the one that has like the little cut-ins and everything, definitely very pretty, very impactful. If you have the time to devote to making a highly detailed with like a lot more leaves, or even mixing up your leaf patterns, I strongly recommend doing it. Again, like, because for the sake of keeping things as simple as possible, for anyone following along that's never attempted this technique or approach to painting before, I just want to keep things as simple as possible. However, once you get an idea of what it is that I'm doing here, you make it your own at home and layer in all kinds of different leaves. Like, get all crazy with your colors. Like, have fun seeing what happens when you put certain colors on top of other colors, and how impactful your artwork can look when you do this. Alright, so we are once again in a spot. Gonna have to let that dry a little bit before I can come in, and our final color is gonna be red. So next up, red. Our green is dry enough now. We can go ahead and start working on those last two leaves. It's a little wet. Hopefully it's not gonna be too bad. Usually the rule of thumb is if you can drag your finger and spread the pigment, you can't, don't paint next to it yet. But if you touch it and you can spread it, like it feels a little damp to the touch, that's okay. As long as no pigment spreads, or if you put your finger down and you pick it up and there's nothing on it, you can go ahead and start adding your next layer. Alright, so the last one we're going to add is going to be red. Okay. Don't think I'll be ordering this watercolor paper again. Not the biggest fan. Alright, and again, so red and green actually sit on opposite sides of the spectrum from one another. So, the color spectrum, I should say. And they're complementary colors, which means if you blend them together, they will give you a brown if you do equal parts of each. However, wherever there's more red into the green, you're going to get more of a maroon. And whenever there's more green into the red, you'll get like a forest green. Okay. I like the way that looks. Maybe I should add a little more red in there. Just a little more. I like to work with a wet brush. My brush is soaking wet. That's why I don't like this paper. If you're somebody that has a tendency to work on the dry side, where you're doing dry brush technique, this paper would be fine. It doesn't have a really, there's like not deep grit in it, so it would be good for like fine detail work. However, for the sort of watercolor painting that I tend to enjoy doing, this is too thin for me. I like my paper to be soaking wet. I want those pigments to just float all over the place. It's so much more fun when they float everywhere. Alright. Now we're coming to the end of this demonstration. Add a little more of that pigment. Red's one of those that if you want to get heavy-handed with your pigment, I strongly encourage you to do so, just because red is hard to keep red. Because the moment you add water to it, it dilutes those pigments. And what do you get when you put red paint on white paper? Ink. Alright, so we have our color blocking with wash. Short little demo. If I was going to go back after it's dried, just to add some balance here, because everyone else has 3 leaves except for the red, I would probably maybe add another leaf up here in this corner, just to, again, balance it out. But overall, I'm really happy with the way that this came out, and I think it looks really great. I'd love to see this blown up onto a larger piece of paper, like something way bigger. Would be really quite profound and striking. But for what it is that we're doing, I hope that this was a great demonstration. It kind of gives you a base to work from, so that you can kind of take this technique and, like I said, make it your own. Whatever it is that you do create, if you would like to share what it is that you're making, I would love to see the artwork that you're creating from these videos, and I look forward to having you tune in with me the next time that I have another one of these demonstrations. And thank you so much for tuning in to D. Giles Art Styles, and we look forward to having you back again. All right, y'all, keep making art and having a good time with it, okay? Bye.